Welcome to session 1 of a series working through Merwe's Biblical Hebrew Reference Grammar. In this video, we'll look at the first 3 sections of the grammar, which provides an introduction to Hebrew as a language and describes where this grammar fits into the history of grammatical treatments of Biblical Hebrew itself. First, let's take a 30,000-foot view of Biblical Hebrew as a language. Hebrew is known as a Semitic language. The word Semitic refers to languages found in Western Asia, which is commonly labeled the ancient Near East in scholarly literature. This region is made up of the Arabian Peninsula and the Fertile Crescent. The region on the map with the diagonal lines is the Fertile Crescent, and the Arabian Peninsula is southwest of that region. The word Semitic comes from the tradition that most of these people who spoke these languages are descended from the line of Shem in Genesis 10, verses 21 through 31. It's also helpful to know that the Semitic languages are commonly divided into 2, East and West Semitic. Biblical Hebrew is in a subgroup called Northwest Semitic. Hebrew has a long history and has undergone a series of developments over the millennia. Here are the language's 4 major stages. Stage 1 is Biblical and Epigraphic Hebrew, and we'll primarily focus our attention on this stage, but we'll say more about that in a moment. Stage 2, Rabbinic Hebrew, was in use as a spoken language between 165 BC and the end of the 2nd century AD. It continued as a literary language for several more centuries after that. And Stage 3, Medieval Hebrew, developed during the Middle Ages, sometime between the 7th and 15th centuries, and Arabic is a major influence on this stage of the language. Stage 4, Modern Hebrew, is the language spoken today by Jews. It was revived as a living language around the end of the 19th century. It's the official language of the nation of Israel. As its name implies, Merwe's grammar focuses on Biblical Hebrew. Well, this is the first stage of the language. That is actually a simplistic statement. We can and should further subdivide this stage of Hebrew, which was used for roughly 1,000 years, into further substages. The first substage is called Archaic Biblical Hebrew, and we can see this in some of the Bible's poetry that definitely seems very old. The second substage is called Israelian Hebrew. This is the dialect of northern Israel and is thought to be reflected in the Elijah and Elisha narratives, plus some other literature. It's also attested in the Samaria Ostraca. The third substage is called Standard Biblical Hebrew. It was prominent from roughly 1000 to 587 BC, that is, from the era of the monarchy to the time of the exile. The fourth substage is called Late Biblical Hebrew. It's the form of the language seen in post-exilic texts until around the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, Hebrew was a consonantal language until 600 AD, when scribes created a system of vowel pointing. These scribes were called Masoretes, which just means to hand down. Now, several different versions of the vowel system were created, but the most prominent system came from the Ben Asher family. They lived in Tiberias and Israel around 900 AD. Now, Merwe's grammar takes the Tiberian tradition as the basis for the grammar, but it is important to know that there are other vowel systems. In the third section of Chapter 1, Merwe offers a 30,000-foot view of approaches to Biblical Hebrew offered over the centuries. The first era he describes extends from 1000 to 1500 AD. During this time frame, Jewish grammarians played an important role. Scholars like Abraham Ibn Ezra and David Kimi wrote important grammars that employed grammatical frameworks used in Arabic. Christian grammarians played an important role during the next period from 1500 to 1750 AD. Based in Europe, these grammarians based their analysis on Biblical Hebrew on the Latin language. The study of Biblical Hebrew during this era de-emphasized rhetoric and came to serve as little more than a resource for doing theology. The third area of Biblical Hebrew grammarians focused on comparing Biblical Hebrew to other Semitic languages, and this was from the 1750 to the 1960s. In doing so, scholars could provide a historical account of how Hebrew developed in the manner it did, and this enables scholars to offer a family tree of the Semitic languages and position Biblical Hebrew within that tree. This historical comparative approach meant that the syntax took a backseat and played a relatively minor role in the discussion of Hebrew grammar. Since 1960, however, the grammatical analysis of Biblical Hebrew has proceeded in a number of new directions, influenced by broader developments in linguistic analysis. For example, the works of Waltke and O'Connor and Joan Maroca utilized structuralist grammar, which examines how components of a language relate to one another in a specific period of history. Generative grammar is a second important model for Biblical Hebrew over the last 60 years. This approach suggests that there are universal principles in language which are applied in a limited number of ways in specific languages. While no comprehensive grammar has been developed on the basis of generative grammar, a number of aspects of Biblical Hebrew have been analyzed in this way. A third important approach is called functional grammar. And functional grammar emphasizes the specific choices a writer has to make in order to communicate, and this likewise has played an important role in the last 60 years. Finally, van der Merwe briefly notes three other approaches to Biblical Hebrew grammar. Text linguistics discusses how sentences are combined to create text. Pragmatics looks at the relationship between language and its use in real-life situations. Sociolinguistics explores the social dynamics between members of different parts of society and the types of language they use and when they use it. And then discourse analysis is the examination of systematic patterns in whole passages of text. Van der Merwe identifies 7 trends that have been apparent in the last couple of decades, sort of with the advent of the 21st century. He suggests that structuralist, generative, and functional approaches to Hebrew grammar are still important because they emphasize empirical data. Scholars can use technology and databases to establish an increasingly better knowledge of Biblical Hebrew. The second approach is that cognitive linguistics suggests that language is a way to organize, process, and convey informational structures. It suggests that we need to understand how the human mind makes meaning to better understand how we communicate through language. Another trend van der Merwe identifies is that grammarians of Biblical Hebrew are increasingly using insights from modern linguistics. As our understanding of language has improved, our understanding of how ancient Hebrew has needed to evolve. So the fourth trend van der Merwe recognizes is the move to challenge some traditional models for the development of Biblical Hebrew as a language itself. Another move he identifies is towards a greater appreciation for the complex social dynamics between people that influences the use and development of grammar itself. A typological approach is another trend that he identifies, and it can be helpful for teaching Biblical Hebrew to non-Western learners because it suggests that there are a limited number of constructions in any particular language. A final trend van der Merwe notes is that grammarians are paying greater attention to the interplay between scribal practices and oral tradition that combined to produce the text. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in Biblical Hebrew, make sure you check out these other videos.